Welcome to NTD Evening News. Our top story tonight, President Trump warning Iran of even more brutal attacks if they don't agree to a nuclear deal, what the president says about a potentially massive conflict, and how he plans to keep the U.S. out of wars. The president's latest remarks come after Israeli forces strike Iran's nuclear facilities, and Iran responds by launching missiles and attack drones at Israel. Jason Perry reports. Global leaders are weighing in on the growing tensions. Arian Pastar has details on NATO's requests to the U.S. The sole survivor of yesterday's Air India plane crash describes the last moments of the flight. Meanwhile, investigators recover the aircraft's black box. And in Los Angeles, hundreds of Marines arrive to protect federal property and personnel. What residents and business owners are saying as protests in the city continue.
This is NTD Evening News, live from our global headquarters in New York City. Here's Tiffany Meyer.
Good evening, and thank you for joining us tonight. I'm Kevin Hogan, in for Tiffany Meyer. In the Middle East, Israeli forces have launched a series of strikes in Iran, taking out Iran's nuclear facilities and some top military leaders. Iran's supreme leader said Israel will now face severe punishment following the attack. NTD's Jason Perry has the latest.
In a video released on Thursday evening, Israeli fighter pilots were seen boarding aircraft to strike Iran's nuclear facilities in an operation called Rising Lion. And soon after, smoke was seen rising in the skies over Tehran. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu said that Iran was getting very close to making a nuclear weapon, and he gave an update on Israel's operation.
We struck at the heart of Iran's nuclear enrichment program. We struck at the heart of Iran's nuclear weaponization program. We targeted Iran's main enrichment facility in Natanz. We targeted Iran's leading nuclear scientists working on the Iranian bomb. We also struck at the heart of Iran's ballistic missile program.
Israel released a video showing the range limitations of Iran's radar and surface-to-air missile launchers. And it showed how Israeli fighter jets were able to avoid detection and launch strikes from above. Israeli forces also reported striking the locations of senior operatives in the Iranian military leadership. One of the Iranian generals who was killed is seen in this video from 2019, calling for the annihilation of Israel and the United States. Iran's supreme leader said Friday that Israel would face severe punishment following the attacks.
They should not think they struck and it's over. No. They started this and triggered a war. We will not allow them to walk away unscathed from the great crime they have committed.
Iran responded by launching attack drones and a barrage of rockets at Israel. Many were intercepted, but at least one reportedly struck Tel Aviv. No injuries were immediately reported. Israel also asked people not to publish or show the locations of the hits, saying Iran monitors the footage to improve its impact capabilities. Meanwhile, the state of Israel remains on high alert as Israeli hospitals prepared underground wards in the country. An official gave this message to residents.
Magen David Adom advises the entire population to follow the instructions given by the Home Front Command. Ensure that your safe rooms are clear, available, that you have food and water in there in case you have to remain there for a long time.
Netanyahu said the military operation will continue for as many days as it takes to remove the threat. Jason Perry, NTD News.
As Iran launches missiles at Tel Aviv, Israel tells its citizens abroad not to display Jewish symbols in public. Meanwhile, at the United Nations, an Israeli envoy justifies the attacks. NTD's international correspondent Arian Pastar has more on the global reaction to the strikes.
This was a calculated and necessary action.
Israel's envoy to the United Nations explains the reasoning behind Thursday's strikes on Iran. Israel targeted Iran's nuclear sites as well as high-ranking military leaders. The Israeli envoy suggests the strikes on the nuclear facilities were preventative.
Intelligence obtained by Israel revealed a secret program to develop all necessary parts of a bomb.
A spokesperson for the UN Secretary General is weighing in as well.
The Secretary General asks both sides to show maximum restraint, avoiding at all costs a descent into deeper conflict.
Meanwhile, in countries across the globe, Israel is temporarily closing its embassies. Citizens are being advised not to display Jewish or Israeli symbols in public places. The government is also urging Israelis abroad to cooperate with local security services if faced with hostile activity. Israelis abroad are also being encouraged to fill out a form to update the government on their location. Now, this was also done after the October 7th attacks by Hamas. That's so that Israel can, first of all, coordinate the return of its reservists and also to organize rescue flights. And officials from countries like Germany, the UK, France and others are reacting to Israel's preemptive strikes on Iran. Most of them are calling for de-escalation, such as the Secretary General of NATO.
It is now crucial for many allies, including the United States, to work as we speak to de-escalate. I know they're doing that.
We are not involved in this action overnight. I want to emphasize that. We're urging restraint at this time.
We cannot live in a world where Iran possesses the atomic bomb because it is an existential threat and a threat to the security of all of us.
You know our position. We urge all sides to refrain from steps that lead to further escalation and jeopardize security in the entire region.
Top-level UN envoys were scheduled to hold a conference next week to discuss a two-state solution for Israel and the Palestinians. French President Emmanuel Macron now says the conference has been postponed amid the rising tensions. Arian Pastar, NTD News.
Did Israel's strike effectively neutralize the nuclear threat, and was Israel acting unilaterally? Tune into Capitol Report with Steve Lance at 7 p.m. Eastern Time to hear analysis and insight from retired U.S. Army Lieutenant Colonel Darren Gaub. And President Trump says Iran now has a second chance to agree to a nuclear deal after Israel launched preemptive strikes against Iran's nuclear program. But the president also warns that if Iran refuses, it could face even more brutal attacks. NTD's White House correspondent Iris Tao has more.
As Israel strikes Iran's nuclear program and military targets, President Trump says he was fully aware of Israel's plans while warning Iran to make a nuclear deal before, quote, there is nothing left. A day before, Trump warned,
look, there's a chance of massive conflict.
The Israeli strikes come after months of attempted, yet seemingly stalled nuclear negotiations between the U.S. and Iran. Trump, in a Friday post, said he gave Iran a 60-day ultimatum to make a deal. Today is day 61. Despite the warning, Trump's still hopeful about a deal, saying after the attacks that Iran might have a second chance. Earlier this week, Trump accused Iran of using delaying tactics.
I am much less confident of a deal being made.
Trump met with his National Security Council in the Situation Room on Friday, and a White House official says Trump also talked to Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu after the attacks on the same day. This week, he vowed to keep the U.S. out of wars.
I've kept us out of wars. We defeated ISIS completely, 100%. I believe in peace through strength. We're the greatest military in the world.
Meanwhile, foreign policy experts are warning that China could take actions after its proxy, Iran, is attacked.
Telling the Chinese that they're losing their proxy, Iran. It is not going to take that lying down, and it's probably going to get Iran or some other party to strike us.
The U.S. has sanctioned Chinese companies for supplying dual-use components to Iran's proxies in war. While most countries avoid Iranian oil due to sanctions, China buys most of Iran's crude oil exports. Reporting by Iris Tao, NTD News.
And on Capitol Hill, lawmakers from both sides of the aisle express support for Israel and President Trump's approach to the Iran nuclear negotiations. Our Washington correspondent, Luis Martinez, has the details.
Well, we know that Iran is the leading state sponsor of terror, right? Their proxies have attacked Americans, killed Americans, attacked our bases, and of course, our key democratic ally, Israel. The bottom line is there was a 60-day deadline that the president put forth for Iran to negotiate. Iran, as the president said this morning, is welcome to come back to the table today and actually disarm their nuclear program.
That was Democratic Congressman Josh Gottheimer, who's running for governor of New Jersey, and he backed President Trump's efforts to negotiate with Iran. Senator John Fetterman also came out in support of Israel and posted on social media that our commitment to Israel must be absolute, and I fully support this attack. Keep wiping out Iranian leadership and the nuclear personnel. Democratic Congressman Seth Moulton also backed the president's approach, but questioned what's next after Israel launched Operation Rising Lion.
they're also clearly saying this is not the approach that we wanted to take. And although Iran might not believe that, there's a lot of evidence to suggest that this is not what Donald Trump wanted to see happen. After this ends, whatever it is, how long does it take Iran to reconstitute? I asked that question of the commander of Central Command yesterday.
Republican Congressman Keith Self expressed concerns over potential U.S. vulnerabilities to attacks like the ones launched by Ukraine and Israel, and posted on X that twice now, armed drones have been smuggled into adversary territory before being activated to destroy major targets. The U.S. needs to heed the advances in warfare. Fiscal conservatives pleaded with the Trump administration and posted on social media. Congresswoman Marjorie Taylor Greene posted, "I am praying for peace. Peace, that is my official position." Congressman Thomas Massie said Israel doesn't need U.S. taxpayers' money for defense if it already has enough to start offensive wars. And Senator Rand Paul posted that the American people overwhelmingly oppose our endless wars. I urge President Trump not to join in any war between other countries. It's important to note that this week, Congress began marking up its appropriations bills for fiscal year 2026. Secretary of Defense Pete Hegseth appeared before Congress on 4 different occasions to testify on the Pentagon's needs to confront threats worldwide. Reporting from Washington, D.C., Luis Eduardo Martinez, NTD News.
The State Department urging U.S. government employees and Americans in Israel to shelter in place. That's as retaliatory strikes from Iran are underway. NTD's Washington correspondent Jack Bradley has the latest on the State Department's response.
Our absolute foremost priority is the protection of U.S. citizens, personnel, and forces in the region.
The State Department is responding to the escalation in the Middle East. Right now, there's no plans to evacuate or assist Americans working to depart Israel. That's as the country's major airport is closed for now. The U.S. Embassy in Jerusalem is telling all government employees and their families to shelter in place until further notice. Americans are urged not to travel to Iran and should leave there immediately or shelter in place if that's impossible. After the bombing in Iran, which now President Trump says that he was informed of prior to the strike, it was Secretary of State Marco Rubio who was the first to announce the U.S. response. He said in part that we are not involved and Iran should not target the U.S. The Iranian foreign minister said this week that it would strike U.S. military bases if there was an attack on Iran.
As Secretary Rubio said, Iran should not target U.S. interests or personnel.
A 6th round of nuclear talks between the U.S. and Iranian officials were set to take place on Sunday in Oman, but that was prior to the strikes. President Trump maintains that a deal can still be reached, even though it's reported that top Iranian negotiators were killed in these strikes. Israel has maintained that Iran has been stalling in negotiations with the U.S. to quietly build up its nuclear program. The Trump administration's maximum pressure campaign involves sanctioning Iranian oil exports, particularly to China. And prior to his inauguration, President Trump said that when asked if the U.S. will go to war with Iran, he said anything can happen as it's a very volatile situation. During Trump's first term going back, he ordered the airstrike that killed Iran's top military commander at the time, Qasem Soleimani. Reporting by Jack Bradley, NTD News.
In an update on yesterday's aviation tragedy, the sole survivor of the Air India plane crash spoke to a local reporter today from his hospital bed. Officials have also recovered the aircraft's black box, which may shed light on the crash that killed more than 240 people on board. NTD's Andrew Thomas has the details.
Ramesh Vishwash Kumar got lucky. Police say he was in seat 11A near the emergency exit and managed to escape through a broken hatch. He described the experience to a local broadcaster.
Everything happened in front of my eyes. I don't believe how I survived. For some time, I thought I was also going to die. But when I opened my eyes, I realized I was alive, and I tried to unbuckle myself from the seat and escape from where I could. It was in front of my eyes that the air hostess and others died.
Vishwash Kumar was filmed after the crash limping on the street in a blood-stained T-shirt. The sole survivor detailed the last moments of the flight.
After the takeoff, within a minute, it felt like the plane came to a standstill in air for 5 to 10 seconds. The green and white cabin lights turned on in the flight. I could feel engine thrust increasing to go up, but it crashed with speed into the building.
Meanwhile, India's Aircraft Accident Investigation Bureau has begun its probe into the cause of the crash. Key to the investigation will be the plane's black box flight recorders. There are 2 recorders, a cockpit voice recorder and a separate flight data recorder.
All together with the flight data recorder that includes all the speed, altitude, control input, and the cockpit voice recorder with the cockpit conversation, they provide the investigators with a fairly detailed picture of what happened and how the crew responded.
The boxes are not actually black, but high visibility orange. The device's durability also helps investigators.
They're built to withstand high forces, high impact crashes, intense fires, deep sea pressure, for example. And again, they are usually located at the tail of the aircraft to increase the survivability.
Andrew Thomas, NTD News.
Coming up, protests continued through the night as Southern California enters day 8 of unrest. Christina Corona tells us how police are responding and what some in the community are saying. And overwhelming bipartisan support on the House floor as lawmakers pass a bill to address the fentanyl crisis. President Trump is expected to sign the bill. Melina Wisecup reports after the break. Welcome back. An update on the unrest in Southern California. A U.S. military commander says about 200 Marines have been deployed to Los Angeles. They've been ordered to protect federal property and personnel. NTD's David Lamb reports.
As more protests are expected this weekend, the military says 2 companies of Marines have mobilized into Los Angeles, a rare move after days of protests over immigration raids. In a virtual press conference, Major General Scott Sherman, who oversees 4,700 National Guard troops in L.A., said approximately 200 Marines were deployed at the Wilshire Federal Building in L.A. Thursday night.
I would say a handful are protecting installations, federal property, federal assets, which is one mission. Then the rest have been missions that we've actually received missions from federal law enforcement.
Sherman said the troops are trained in de-escalation techniques and are there to protect law enforcement and hold off crowds as responders perform their federal law enforcement duties.
All military members are mobilized with their assigned weapon. They have standard crowd control gear, which includes a helmet, their face shield, the shield, baton, and gas mask.
And updates on the legal battle over National Guard troops in California. On Thursday, federal judge Charles Breyer ruled that President Trump's deployment of National Guard members is illegal, and he directed the president to return control of the troops to California. But the Court of Appeals has blocked that judge's order temporarily and said it would hold a hearing on this matter this coming Tuesday. David Lamb, NTD News, California.
It's day 8 of protests across Southern California, and while some demonstrations remain peaceful, others are turning tense after nightfall. NTD's Christina Corona reports on the overnight arrests and what some residents are saying about the protests.
Protests continue through the night as Southern California enters day 8 of unrest. In some areas, tensions escalated after dark, with crowds refusing to disperse and fireworks lighting up the sky. Now some locals are weighing in on the ongoing demonstrations.
I think it's a beautiful thing that everybody's standing up, and it doesn't matter kind of what side you're on. Everyone's super passionate about something, and there needs to be change. America's big on bringing people from all across the world and making something good out of it. And I think that we need to encourage that.
Several people I approached chose not to speak, saying the situation is too sensitive or emotional to talk about right now. Anti-ICE protesters gathered again Thursday night in Anaheim, California. The demonstration started peacefully outside Angel Stadium, but around 8 p.m., police declared an unlawful assembly and began dispersing the crowd. Some protesters moved into a nearby neighborhood near Disneyland and set off fireworks. By 11 p.m., most had cleared out, according to Anaheim police. No arrests were made and no force was used. Officials with the Los Angeles Police Department detailed several arrests made from Thursday evening into Friday morning. 33 people were arrested for failure to disperse. 13 were arrested for violating curfew. One person was taken into custody for resisting a police officer. Another was arrested for pointing a laser at a police airship. One individual was also arrested on a robbery warrant after being detained for curfew violation.
Mayor Karen Bass announced at a press conference yesterday that the curfew will remain in place for the next few days. Reporting from the city of Covina, Christina Corona, NTD News.
President Trump's attempt to make changes to federal elections has been blocked. Today, a federal judge sided with a group of Democratic state attorneys general who challenged the effort. Trump's March 25th executive order would have required proof of citizenship for everyone registering to vote for federal elections. The action would also have set an election day deadline for mail-in ballots. The White House has defended the order as, quote, standing up for free, fair, and honest elections. The administration called proof of citizenship a common sense requirement. Massachusetts District Judge Denise J. Casper granted a preliminary injunction today, ruling that the Constitution doesn't give the president authority on how states conduct elections. And a bill to address the fentanyl crisis now heads to President Trump's desk. It would increase penalties for fentanyl trafficking. Republicans and Democrats support the measure. NTD's Melina Wisecup has the details.
On a vote of 321 to 104, with more than 100 Democrats joining the GOP in support, lawmakers in the House passed the Halt Fentanyl Act on Thursday.
Opioid overdoses have become an epidemic in this country. Last year, over 100,000 Americans lost their lives to overdose, and fentanyl poisoning is the driving force behind that. But, Mr. Speaker, it is not just the country at large that's experienced this problem. In my own district, we've seen an over 1,000% increase in the rate of fentanyl poisoning and deaths.
The Halt Fentanyl Act will make fentanyl a Schedule I drug, putting it on par with heroin. Though the action saw strong bipartisan support, some who opposed it expressed concerns about the permanent fix and increased penalties for those involved in fentanyl trafficking.
The temporary option would have left the door open for an off-ramp to substances found to have potential medical applications. But this Republican bill would also exacerbate inequities in our criminal justice system because drugs placed on Schedule I include mandatory minimum sentencing.
Others, though, said the bill is critical as the Chinese regime is involved.
This bill is a critical step in combating the opioid crisis in our country because China and Mexico are heavily involved in this business. China sends the precursors of fentanyl and fentanyl analogs, the API or active pharmaceutical ingredients, to the cartels in Mexico, who are then making the drugs and bringing it across our borders. By making these analogs permanently Schedule I, it removes the incentive to traffic these drugs into our country due to the penalties if you are caught.
He noted that after Congress previously placed fentanyl into Schedule I temporarily, there was a 930% decrease in fentanyl analogs coming into the country. Analogs are often deadly alterations of medical fentanyl. The bill has already passed the Senate, and President Trump is expected to sign it. Reporting from Washington, D.C., Melina Wisecup, NTD News.
The Department of Homeland Security says 4 detainees have escaped from a federal immigration detention center in Newark, New Jersey. Newark's mayor had cited reports of a possible uprising and escape after disorder broke out at the facility last night. Protesters outside Delaney Hall pushed against barricades as vehicles passed through gates. An attorney for a detainee at the facility told NJ.com that detainees became violent after meals were delayed. Delaney Hall has been the site of clashes between Democratic officials and federal immigration officers. On May 9th, Newark Mayor Ras Baraka was arrested and charged with trespassing. The charge was later dropped. Democratic Representative LaMonica McIver was also arrested at the facility. McIver is charged with assaulting federal officers. The New Jersey Democrat denies the charges. And stay with us, Iran launches retaliatory airstrikes at Israel following Israel's biggest ever military strike against its long-standing enemy. Could the U.S. be pulled into the conflict? National security analyst Rebecca Grant joins us to discuss when we come back. Good to have you back with us. Just moments ago, the Israeli military says it identified a new wave of missiles launched from Iran toward Israel. It's instructed the public to return to shelters with sirens sounding across Israel. and Iran's response to what Reuters calls Israel's biggest ever attack on Iran, in which nuclear sites were targeted, includes hundreds of ballistic missiles in that first wave. It's according to Iran state media. And for more on the developing situation in the Middle East, we invite Rebecca Grant, Vice President of the Lexington Institute and a national security analyst. Thanks for joining us, Rebecca. Give us your assessment. Is Iran's retaliation to inflict maximum damage, and now we see this new wave, or is it to project the appearance of strength while trying to avoid an all-out war?
Well, a bit of both, and Iran is very angry. They've had an incredibly devastating, effective attack carried out by Israel. What got my attention was that Iran launched drone attacks first and now is launching the ballistic missile attacks. Last October, there were about 180 ballistic missiles that came from Iran onto Israel. It sounds like this attack is in that magnitude as well. This is Iran trying to strike back. But as we saw last year, Israel is able to intercept most of these missiles. But I've got to point out the U.S. Navy, U.S. Space Force, Air Force, and others deployed in the Middle East are also on high alert, monitoring these missiles and probably helping to intercept as well.
Understood, Rebecca. And the commander-in-chief of Iran's Revolutionary Guard and one of Iran's most powerful figures were reportedly killed in the attack. Does that risk major further escalation and targeted attacks against Israeli leaders?
Well, the Ayatollah has made clear that he wants reprisals. The death of those officials in the Iranian Revolutionary Guard does not necessarily impact Iran's ability to strike back. But what we're seeing with these missile attacks is they're really untargeted. So whereas Israel directly targeted Iran's illegal nuclear apparatus, the Iranians are just lobbing missiles towards Tel Aviv, irregardless of civilian casualties or anything like that. And so this is sort of a desperate measure by Iran. I'm not sure how long they can keep this up. But last year, when Iran did these attacks, very few missiles got through. It looks like Iran may have stepped up the numbers to try to penetrate the short range and the exo-atmospheric defenses that our U.S. Navy has in place as well. But I think that Iran is going to find these attacks are not effective and don't help the situation at all.
Is there a possibility of the U.S. being pulled into the conflict?
Well, I think Secretary of State Rubio put it best when he said the U.S. is not aiding in Israel's offensive strikes, but it's very clear that the U.S. is helping on the defensive. First of all, we have to track those Iranian missile launches to make sure that they aren't heading for our U.S. forces. 40,000 U.S. forces arrayed from Syria right through to the aircraft carrier in the Red Sea. That's 5,000 sailors right there. So we are very closely watching this. Of course, a lot of Israel's superb military uses U.S.-made equipment, and I think there has been some close informational coordination at the very least. But there's no question tonight that U.S. service members, the U.S. Space Force, watching Iran do all of this, is on high alert, and they are involved in defensive operations in the Middle East tonight.
Understood, Rebecca. And Israel's national security advisor said Israeli strikes alone could not end Iran's nuclear program, but it could set the stage for a U.S.-backed deal to get rid of it. Is that looking more possible now?
Well, President Trump has made clear he'd still like to end this by negotiation. He still wants Iran to step forward and take a reasonable deal to stop enriching uranium and give up what they have left of their weapons program. That would be so smart for Iran to take that. And I think Israel is also holding the door open for this to come to a negotiated settlement. What we'd want to see then is really strong inspections to make sure Iran can never get this close again to having a bomb.
I hear what you're saying here. Israeli officials say that these attacks are the beginning of Operation Rising Lion. So what are the possibilities from here in different scenarios? Do you expect a broader campaign from the Israelis?
Not a broader campaign, but they will want to finish what they've started. So right now with Operation Rising Lion, they are assessing the damage from the first wave of strikes to make sure that they really hit the targets they intended to and didn't have other targets pop up that also need to be struck. They will have very carefully laid out specific goals for the attacks, particularly on the Natanz enrichment site, for the attacks on ballistic missile production, as well as ballistic missile batteries. They will look and see in Israel, hey, did we achieve what we set out to do? If not, there will be additional strikes on those military targets, because Israel's aim is to take out the legitimate military targets, nuclear enrichment, weapons, and leadership. They will continue to strike there until they meet their objectives.
Very important to keep a note of that. And as we've been mentioning, President Trump said it's not too late for Iran to work out a deal which could end the military pressure from the Israelis. Is that the case at this point, and how likely is such an agreement?
Well, it's absolutely the case that that deal is open. And, Israel is in no way trying to go after the Iranian people or widen that war. We want to contain Iran and denuclearize Iran. They're warned that if they did not take a deal after 5 rounds of negotiations, that they would get their military target struck. So it is still possible for this to end with a deal. Hard to say what is going on in the mind of Ayatollah Khamenei tonight.
And Rebecca, while we still have you on the line, we've got the Army's 250th anniversary coming up tomorrow, a big day for the nation's oldest military branch. How would you describe the impact this parade could have on Americans?
We should be celebrating the Army. We're celebrating June 14th because back in 1775, this is when George Washington was told, he left Independence Hall and he went up to Boston, where the firing at Lexington and Concord had occurred. And he said, I will go up, I will get with the Massachusetts militia, I will assemble an army. We are going to be a United States Army and defend against the British. It's an incredible historic moment. And I'm thrilled to celebrate the Army that has carried us from that day through victory in World War II, the Cold War, and that is probably helping to some degree to defend our friends in the Middle East tonight. We've got Army forces all around the world tonight there to do good. And I'm just so glad to see us celebrating the Army on their 250th. It is very well deserved.
We really appreciate your contribution. Rebecca Grant, Vice President of the Lexington Institute, thank you.
Thank you.
And just ahead, the U.S. Army prepares for its 250th anniversary parade. NTD hits the streets in D.C. to hear from the folks in town for the event. More in just a moment after the break. Welcome back. A parade celebrating the Army's 250th anniversary is set to kick off in the nation's capital tomorrow. What does this occasion mean to patriots from across the country? NTD's Sam Wong was out in the National Mall in D.C. to hear from the people.
Are you going to the parade tomorrow?
Yes, we are. We're just excited to be together and celebrate together and see the military and to honor the military for all their service and all the soldiers that have served.
We're going to see if we can. We were in town anyway, so we didn't actually know it was this weekend, so we're going to see if we can find a spot somewhere, sure.
He's a big military kid and he loves it, so he did really good in school, so we figured we'd bring him down here for the few days.
You said your son's in the parade, right?
Yeah, he's in the Army. He will be in the modern era, actually, for the section of the parade.
Got our clear ponchos and we're
ready to go.
Yeah.
We're going to walk around, and if we happen, it just so happens our hotel is right smack in the middle of the parade. I mean, it's on Connecticut on 19th Street.
What's the significance of this parade in your opinion?
Well, it's the 250th anniversary of the Army. I'm going to stick with that.
It's on Flag Day. It's a good day to celebrate the flag.
Yeah, that's pretty cool, though. I mean, that's really cool to have that, because I'm not sure we had celebrations like this before, right? So there's nothing wrong with celebrating our armed forces.
My dad was an Army veteran, passed away from Parkinson's from the Army, and so it was kind of big. I went on the honor flight with him. It was nice to bring my son to see Washington, D.C. and to be able to see the parade.
Why do you think it's important to celebrate this occasion, the 250th anniversary of the founding of the Army?
If we didn't have an Army, we wouldn't be here, keeping us free.
We're from a Navy town, and we have Fleet Week, so the Navy celebrates theirs. So this is just the Army is the oldest one, 250 years. Come on, that's before the Constitution even.
Well, I mean, you got to think about the sacrifices the men and women of our services have given. So it's important that we celebrate those sacrifices. And then if we can take a couple hours out of our day to watch the parade and celebrate that, I think it's important.
Not just the Army, it's the whole military. They protect us, give us the freedom to do the things we can do.
I mean, without them and, fighting for our freedom, we wouldn't wouldn't have the things we have, we wouldn't be able to bring our little guy up the way we are.
We're just so thankful that we live in the United States of America, the land of the free and the brave, and we're thankful for the freedom that we have and the fact that 250 years ago, they were brave enough to stand up and desire a land where people could come and be free.
And tomorrow we have an NTD exclusive interview. Steve Lance sits down with U.S. Secretary of Veterans Affairs Doug Collins. They talk about leading the department through faith and compassion, cutting wait times for veterans, and of course, the historic parade in Washington, D.C., celebrating the Army's 250th anniversary. Here's a preview.
I want to talk about your faith.
Yes.
You're still a chaplain.
Yes.
In the military. Talk to us about how your faith has guided you through the process and how it still may.
There's no, I can't think of doing my job without it. It's like my glasses. I mean, I can see technically without my glasses, but when I put my glasses on, I see much clearer. Well, my faith is that way. It's not something I can take on and off. It's who I have to see what I believe God has called me to do. And so faith, it makes me want to help others. It makes me compassionate, but it also makes me firm resolve that sometimes you have to stand and fight. There's things that are not worth compromising on. And this job for me is taking care of people. It's actually not accepting the bureaucratic answer. It's not accepting we've always done it that way before. I believe God's put us at a special time and a special purpose for a lot of things. So for me, faith is all. I mean, I have, outside my Savior, Jesus, I have nothing. And so I think that's the thing that drives me. And it also gives me another perspective.
Catch the whole interview tomorrow, June 14th at 5 p.m. Eastern, followed by our live special coverage of the Army's 250th anniversary parade in Washington, D.C. Don't miss it. And that's all for today's news. For round-the-clock coverage, visit us at ntd.com/live or download our NTD app. And thanks for tuning in. I'm Kevin Hogan. Good night.
There are real consequences to controlled media. And NTD's founders know them firsthand. Our freedom of thought is the price. This is the lesson that guides us in everything we do.
So there's the tear gas there.
We know the value of a free society. And we take seriously the responsibility to preserve it. We are NTD.